This walk and talk through a model plan is a question that was on the 2014 paper. The question, as you can see, is in what ways did German youth contribute to the war effort during the Second World War, 1939 to 45? It was, I think, question 4, which was a 12 marker, which you would need 18 minutes to write an answer this to. To be quite frank, this was a pretty tough question, and I would imagine that many students across the whole country would have really struggled with this one. Having said that, there's a lesson to be learned from this, and that is you really can't relax with this paper at all. You need to know absolutely everything really, really well. So here we are. I've written a model plan for you that would make it absolutely airtight if it comes up again. This is how you would approach it. The introduction, point out that fanatical, indoctrinated Hitler youth played a key role in civil defence during World War II and were also used in active combat roles, especially in the last few weeks of the war in the final defence of Berlin. So you're just setting the question up as you always do with an introduction. Remember, this is about how the youth contributed in the Second World War, 1939 to 45. So let's move on to the main part of the answer. Now this is a very simple structure for you to learn. All you've got to remember is make 3 points. And as always, if you're not a fast writer, as long as you make those 3 points, that will set you up to a reasonable mark, a grade C. Expand on each of these 3 points with the detail that lies to the right, and that will push you to the higher marks, grade B, A and A star. So preferably add as much detail as you can, so turn each of those points into a full paragraph. Okay, so how are you going to do this? The first main paragraph after your introduction is you really want to emphasise the fact during World War II, back in Germany, children played a key part in emergency services. The Hitler youth leader during World War II was a Nazi called Arthur Axmann. Fairly straightforward one for you to learn that, and it'll be a good name for you to learn. He, during World War II, organised the Hitler Youth into being what we call an auxiliary fighting force. Auxiliary means supplementary. They would actually supplement the ordinary forces, the regular forces, in various ways. Now the key point you want to make here is that from 1943 onwards, and I put that date there, the war was turning against Germany, and from this point onwards the Allies, particularly the British and the Americans, were bombing German cities regularly. In particular, precise details always help. There are 2 cities, Dresden and Hamburg, both of them are shown there, that were very, very heavily bombed during in 1943 through to 1944. So the role of the German youth, how they contributed, was they put out fires, they manned the anti-aircraft guns, they also helped in the Reich Postal Service, the German Postal Service. So again, those little details will really help score you marks. So that will be one paragraph. Their role helping the bombed out German cities in terms of an auxiliary role. The next paragraph, which would be your 3rd paragraph, including your introduction, during World War II, the Gestapo really clamped down, increased their control over the ordinary lives of German people, desperately anxious to make sure that morale did not plummet, the morale did not go down. The message through Joseph Goebbels' propaganda machine was that all Germans should pull together, and that as long as they did that, even though the war was turning against Germany, Germany would still win that war. So the Hitler Youth were important because they acted as a network for the Gestapo, a network of informants. They would watch out for people who may be damaging morale, people who grumbled, or people who were actively being unloyal to Germany. For example, people who were in their own flats and apartments tuning into foreign radio broadcasts. The BBC, their world service during World War II, tried to undermine German morale by broadcasting radio messages that reached into Germany, telling the German people about the awful things that the Germans were doing in the East, the murders of the Jews and so on. Germans were absolutely forbidden to listen to these radio broadcasts. If anyone were caught listening to radio broadcasts, then it was a death sentence, and that would often be what we call a summary death sentence, where you could be shot on the spot. Children played a key part in listening out, watching out in their own homes, even reporting their own parents if they knew they were listening to foreign radio broadcasts. They would report them to the Gestapo. This process where you denounce or report is called denunciation. So again, keywords, try to use them in that paragraph. So there's 2 points. The first, remember, is emergency services. The second point is informants. And then the third point, and probably the most substantial point, is that in the very final year of the war, they acted as a reserve army. Now, at this stage of the war, the Germans were in full retreat from all directions. So in the east, the German army were being pushed back into Germany by the advancing Russian army, and in the west, the German army were being pushed back by the advancing American and British troops that had liberated Nazi-occupied Europe in June 1944 with the D-Day landings. By the beginning of 1945, German soldiers were retreating onto their own soil, and at this point there was their regular troops were so depleted, so many ordinary soldiers had been killed, that the Hitler Youth were called in as a reserve army. The reserve army was called the Volkssturm, the People's Defence, and in the final stages of the war, the Volkssturm were the key soldiers who, for example, defended the capital city, Berlin. Now, children were a key part of the Volkssturm in the final months of the war. So I've included some examples there for you. The 12th SS Panzer Hitlerjugend, Hitler Youth, was an army division of children, 16 to 18-year-olds, who defended Normandy when the Allies landed at D-Day in June 1944. In February 1945, Hitler approved 6,000 Hitler Youth be employed as soldiers to strengthen Berlin's defence lines. In April 1945, Hitler ordered 700 Hitler Youth members to go out to actively engage in combat against Russian tanks who were advancing on the east of Berlin. So the bottom line there is basically children as young as 12 years old were being used in the final weeks of the war. Your concluding paragraph then, sum up and reach a judgment, so you can look at the points there. Point out that by the middle of World War II, children, they've gone through 10 years of being indoctrinated. Try to use that word in your answer. It's better than saying brainwashed. They've gone through Nazi schools, they've gone through Hitler Youth groups, by the middle of the 1940s, that's 10 years of this, you've got German children are fanatically loyal to the Nazi regime. And so, tragically, thousands and thousands of children died in the last few weeks of the war. So sum up those key points: the auxiliary forces to assist recovery efforts in the bombed out German cities, network of informants for the Gestapo, and assisting in civil defence, reserve soldiers working in the Volkssturm in the defence of Berlin. Now, the document that you're looking at here, I've uploaded it to Frog. It's in the usual revision area for Germany. You'll see it in the folder of model answers. I will send an email that will give you a direct link to the document as well. You'll notice you're just looking at page 1 here, but on page 2 I've taken an extract from the Chief Examiner's report where they scanned and uploaded an answer that actually got 12 out of 12. So definitely worth you reviewing that answer. It pretty much uses exactly the structure I've just taken you through. So the first paragraph talks about the civil defence helping the bombed out cities. The second paragraph talks about the network of informants. Notice the way this answer says firstly, secondly. Okay, you've been taught that particular method. This was highlighted by the examiners as a 12 mark, as a maximum mark answer. On to the remainder of that answer, and again you will see the third paragraph then looks at the issue of the reserve fighting force, the Volkssturm. It doesn't have the precise detail that I've given you in my model answer, but yet in spite of that it's still got 12 out of 12. Again, notice the word furthermore there, and pulling it together into a conclusion. There's that word overall that shows there is a conclusion. So it's a nice one to use there. And as you can see at the very bottom, the examiner's comment says it was a high level 3 response, highly structured. So in other words, that would have got the full marks, 12 out of 12. Hopefully that was useful to you. A good one to answer now, if that one comes up again this year.